welcome to another episode of On Patrol with the Suffolk County PBA. I'm CJ Hunter, the treasurer of the PBA.
I'm Tanner Brandemore, the sergeant at arms of the PBA.
And joining us today is David Davis. He's the general counsel for the Suffolk County PBA, and he's a labor attorney with Davis Ferber LLP. And thanks for coming on, David.
And thanks for having me, Tanner, CJ, and the whole PBA. This is a great opportunity for me, and I really think a great thing that you guys are doing with these podcasts and getting information out to not only your members, but way beyond your members also. And it's very innovative, and it's consistent with the history of the Suffolk County PBA, which is one of the things I want to talk about today. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we definitely look to be innovative and try to look for the newest, best things all the time and how to benefit our members and get our messages out. And David's been here longer than anybody else that's around now. Your father was the general counsel to the PBA. You eventually took over the firm. Why don't you just let everybody know a little bit about yourself and the history and how you got to this point?
It's weird to be the old guy because I came in, I was the kid, and the director of labor relations when I started was a guy named David Green. So we'd go into meetings or negotiations or anything like that, and with my father, and I was kind of tagging along as a young attorney. And somebody would say David, and I'd turn, but inevitably it wasn't me that they were talking to back in those days, and it was a little frustrating. I remember that, but So my father, the story of the firm and its relationship with the PBA started with my father many years ago. He dropped out of high school and joined the Navy, and when he got out of the Navy and was driving a taxi in New York City for a while, and decided to get married and better get a real job. So he joined NYPD. And if you ask him, and maybe one day you'll have him on a podcast too, which might be a fun podcast. But so he said he'd still would have been a city cop for 20, 30 years, except he couldn't walk a footpost in the cold. Screw that. So he had enough of that. So he wound up doing 8 years on NYPD. But while he was at NYPD, he went back to school. He got a bachelor's and ultimately a master's in criminal justice at John Jay, and then quit the job after 8 years to go to law school. Now, he's got a more exciting story than I do, because my grandfather, who is from the old world and a tough cookie, told him, and I was very young at that time. I remember hearing stories from both my grandfather and from my parents, and my grandfather telling my father, "What are you, an asshole? You're going to quit this job with a salary and a pension to go to law school? How are you going to feed your family, you idiot?"
It's a big risk.
It was a big risk, and he told him, "You can't feed your family, because you're in school. Don't ask me for money. You're a moron." Obviously, it worked out pretty well. So you never know. But it was a big risk, and he was the first person in our family tree to ever graduate college.
Did he start the firm?
So he got out of law school. And I'm telling his story. Like I said, maybe he should come in he can be a fun podcast for you. But when he got out of law school, he was a Suffolk County ADA for a while. And one of his best friends in NYPD was a guy named Sam D'Amelia. These are all names I know as a kid, people I met as a kid. Sam went on to run for and win New York City PBA president, except he was a lame duck president, meaning he won the presidency, but the rest of his slate lost. But I guess the way it worked in the city back then was the PBA president picked the attorney. So he called my father and said, "Ronnie," my father's Ron Davis. And he said, "Ronnie, I want you to represent the New York City PBA." And my father said, "Sam, I'm a year and a half out of law school. I'm doing misdemeanor trials in Suffolk County. I don't know anything about labor law. I love you, Sam. And that's why the answer is no, I'm not taking the account." And Sam said, "Well, I figured you were going to say that. So you're going to go and work for this guy, Richie Hartman, who represented Suffolk County, Nassau County, New York City PBA, Westchester, firefighters, teachers. He had it all locked up." He got disbarred, and a lot of stuff happened later in his career. That could be a different podcast.
He's a big name in history around here.
He's a huge name in the history, but not necessarily a good name. A lot of corruption, a lot of bad stories and stuff. But my father ran on as a delegate in the city on what was back then in the 60s called the rank and file slate to get rid of all the corruption and all that BS in New York City. So he was always a very straight shooter. So he went to work with Hartman. And Hartman did what you would do or I would do if you ran a law firm and you just got forced to hire somebody. And I screwed up this story. Let me back up. So Sam says, all right, you're not going to represent us. You're going to go work for Hartman. And my father said, I got a job and I'm in the middle of a trial. And D'Amelia says, you don't have a job. I said, what do you mean? He says, I already called Pat Henry, who was the Suffolk County DA at the time, and gave him your resignation. So you're out of a job. You want to work for Hartman? So he went to work with Hartman on Monday morning. And Hartman, like you or I, if you had a new associate forced upon you who was closer with your largest client than you are, he did what most of us would do. He banished them to Suffolk County and said, you're going to work out there. So he did. And he became friends with a guy named Mike Mahoney, who was, I think, treasurer and grievance chairman at the time. And about a year and a half after that, Mike was running for PBA president. And he and my father were very close. And I guess word got out. There's still a debate as to whether Hartman found out that Mahoney was going to hire my father, or my father quit or got fired. Depends who you ask, I think. But either way, my father leaves the firm, and this is while elections are going on in Suffolk County PBA. So he starts his own firm, but he has no clients. So actually the firm's first client was the Long Island Railroad PBA, with all 184 members, which later merged with Metro North, is now the MTA PBA that we still represent. And they have 1,200 members now. But they were a little nothing back then. And but they were the firm's first client. And then Mahoney won the election. When he won, Hartman offered to represent Suffolk County PBA for free, just to freeze out my father.
Oh, wow. I've never heard that part of it.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And then, but Mahoney and my father were very close. And I remember Mike and his family, his wife Liz and his kids back then. So he hired my father, and that's where the firm started. So that was in 1981. So my father's represented Suffolk County PBA really since 79, but in his own firm. And, you know, the prior incarnation of the firm started in 1981, and it was it was DeMartin, Kranz, Davis, and Hirsch for about a year or two. It's before my time. Charlie DeMartin left, and it was Kranz, Davis, and Hirsch until about 2000. I went to college, law school. I got out of law school from Boston College Law School in 1993. Joined the firm. Nepotism worked very well for me. Worked pretty well for my father, too, to be honest.
It helps when your dad's a business owner.
It does. Well, yes and no. Let me tell you. When I went to work, my first day of work, my father said, all right, you're an attorney, you're a professional, so we don't have time off policy. If your work's done, you have the time, take off as much time as you want. I didn't take a day off for 2 years. Right. So
it shows your dedication to your profession, too.
I suffer from, they say on job interviews that, when they ask what your shortcomings are, you should say you're a perfectionist, whatever. I'm not on a job interview, but I'm still saying that because I'm one of those people, like everything on my desk, I want it done before I leave. I tell my staff, like, do it and do it right. Like most of the time, unless it's urgent, I'd rather you do it right than fast. So I'm very much a perfectionist, and, obviously that's helped me a lot in my career, but it's also made my work life a lot more strenuous, but also
attention to detail matters, though, and devil's in the details.
I'm 100% a devil in the detail, attention to detail, all that stuff. So, anyway, I joined the firm in '93.
Were you mentored by your dad when coming into? I'm assuming because he's your dad, but I don't know how hard he rode you, or if he stayed kind of his arms length away, let you do your own thing. How did that go?
So the department then and now has had and has 3 departments. We have. I'll talk about it more a little bit later, but basically 3 departments were general practice, wills, divorces, house closings, things like that. We have personal injury, car accidents, medical malpractice, and then labor, representing the labor unions. And we represent quite a few. My father ran the labor department, so he mentored me. And tale of two cities, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. He tortured me. I don't think he believes it was torture at all. It was probably just good training. He's a tough cookie. Still, he's 83 now, and he's still a tough cookie.
He's probably still mentoring you right now.
No. So interestingly, when he retired 2005, I believe, when he retired, there's some people, it's true for police too. I see it with, PBA board members and stuff. There's at least two types of people when they retire. There's the people who can't let go. And there's people who are gone and it's out of their sight, out of their mind, no looking back at all. And he was the latter. So I remember, I don't know, a year or two after he retired, I had an issue that I had known he had dealt with when he was still working. And I called him up and I said, hey, listen, I got a question. And he's like, what the hell are you calling me for this shit for? I'm retired. I don't want to deal with this crap. I'm like, because you wrote this agreement. I need
Sounds
to
like
know.
a you problem.
Yeah, that's right. So, no, so he's not mentoring me anymore, but he definitely did that. And listen, he was great in his time, but I think he retired. He was only 60. With that whole career, the Navy to police, law school, DA, representing, private practice, representing this PBA and others, he retired at like 61.
Wow.
So he packed a lot in. So he's been, retired 20 something years, and he accomplished a lot. But I think having gone back to school later in life and stuff, I think he had a different approach. Having been a New York City police officer and in the Navy, had a different approach, and labor back then was different. I caught the tail end of this when I started. These labor contracts were not really, they were legal documents, but they weren't legalistic. It was more of a handshake profession and understandings. And we all know what it means. And it wasn't there were lawyers involved, but really to a minor extent. And it had already picked up quite a bit by the time I started. But with maybe not with the Suffolk County, but with some of the smaller groups I represent, that sentiment continued to exist. It is way gone now. Mm-hmm. Now it is so legalistic, and how many cases we've had here and elsewhere where, well, this sentence has a comma here, and because it's a comma, it changes the meaning of this phrase to not be qualifying that phrase, and therefore, and I hate it. I'm a lawyer. My father's obviously a lawyer. My sister is a partner in a law firm, is a lawyer. I've told all my kids, go to any graduate school you want, and I'll help you out best I can, except for law school. You're not going. Yeah.
It's funny you bring up the commas, too. I remember when I was a new trustee, one of the first conversations I walked into in the office was the value of an Oxford comma. And I was like, what is an Oxford comma? That was a learning experience for me as a brand new trustee about grammar.
Yeah. No, it's like that's where labor relations has gone. And now sometimes contract language that's 40, 50 years old that was written by, somebody in HR and a PBA president who don't have legal training, and a lot of lawyers don't get the Oxford comma either, frankly. Mm-hmm. But now you have lawyers today who are analyzing that 50-year-old language and trying to change its meaning based upon that comma. And it annoys the hell out of me because I'm a handshake guy. Like, if this is what it means, this is what it means.
Right. And why go against what the spirit of things are and what past practice has been based on the language that exists?
Correct. As opposed to, I can get over on you with this.
Yeah.
And that's just,
it's sleazy.
I don't like it at all. So anyway, that's kind of the firm's history, where we got started, how we came along. And it's been a long run, and it's been a great run. But like I said, I started with my father in 93. He did mentor me. But a lot of it, and I think it has to be, is trial by fire. We probably represented 25 or 30 unions back then when I started. A lot of the villages and towns on the East End, and a couple in Nassau and stuff. But over the years, we boomed.
How many do you represent today?
85.
Wow.
Yeah. So we represent from the Hamptons up to Kingston, New York, just about 45 minutes south of Albany. So probably 85 unions, around, I would say 70 of them, maybe 70, 75 of them are law enforcement. Picked up a bunch of corrections groups in Westchester, Rockland, Orange County, Dutchess County Sheriffs, Ulster County Sheriffs, City of Newburgh, City of Kingston, Carmel, Ulster.
So paying attention to those little details has paid off for you.
I grew up in Massapequa, and it was a blue collar town, and despite any education levels that I've attained, I consider myself a blue collar person. Those are my peers, and I'm happy to be able to help them. And I respect the job that police officers do. And we were talking before the video started. My father, as I said, was in the Navy, and my son's going to be heading off in 2 months to go to the U.S. Naval Academy. And incredibly proud of him and my other kids too. But I respect law and order and law enforcement and police and corrections, obviously. So it's where my heart is. So I had the opportunity to take the skill set that I had in law school with my passion, which is very nationalistic, supportive of law enforcement and so forth. And not everybody gets to combine their skills and their passions and make a career out of it. And I'd like to think that combined with my OCD.
We'll call it work ethic.
We'll call it work ethic. Thank you. But I think that the culmination of all of those things have allowed me to, be successful or help my clients be successful. And really, we do some advertising for personal injury cases and med mal cases and things like that. But we don't advertise and never have for labor. It's been word of mouth. And, you do a good job for clients. You work hard. You're there for them when they need you. And, you hope that when the next client comes calling and they need a reference and they talk to one PBA guy, they say, you should definitely call Dave. He does a great job for us, and we know he'll do a great job for you too. And let me stop to say, it's not just me. I have a phenomenal team. Partner Chris Rothmich has been with me for about 20 years. Amazing, great attorney, great guy. Alex Kaminsky is with us around, I think, 9 years now.
Yeah, we like both those guys.
Yeah, no, they're great people, great lawyers.
Absolutely.
And then Brian Mitchell joined the team about 2 years ago after it was a really smooth transition for Brian because he was working first in the Suffolk County DA's office and then the Suffolk County Attorney's office, representing Suffolk County police officers and corrections and stuff in defending them in 1983 lawsuits. So when he decided to retire from county service.
What's a 1983 lawsuit?
A 1983 lawsuit is a federal civil rights act where you sue the municipality and the police officer for deprivation of your rights. So false arrest, excessive force, things like that.
So stuff that would be covered under qualified immunity for the cops working.
Well, qualified immunity is a touchy subject because even qualified immunity will throw out the lawsuit. Will say that there's not, if you have qualified immunity, you can't sue municipalities for certain things. But in Suffolk County, we're still going to be covered both contractually and other statutory provisions where you have a right to be defended and indemnified for your employer. So I don't want to minimize qualified immunity because I think it has its place. But a lot of the lawsuits that get filed circumvent qualified immunity anyway. But the cops, for the most part, as long as they're acting in the scope of their employment, and those are the key words under the statute, are going to be defended by the county and indemnified if there's a verdict or a settlement. So there is a percentage of cases that are impacted negatively if qualified immunity were to be repealed, and I don't think it should be. But for the most part, our police officers are going to be pretty well protected anyway. And that's the job that Brian had in the county attorney's office, was doing those federal court trials, defending the police officers. So when he retired from county service and was looking for a job, I was like, well, listen, you want to keep doing basically the same thing, defending cops, but do it on the union side instead of on the county side in disciplinary cases and so forth. So it's been a very smooth transition.
Yeah, round peg, round hole based on his experience and knowledge.
And again, put together a great team. Brian also great guy with lots of experience working with police and understands the police officers' issues. And they're different. They're different than I represent teachers. I represent nurses and bus drivers and they're all valuable employees and people, but the needs and the concerns for police officers are just different. For every profession, they're different. So finding a team like I have today with those individuals involved, it's important. So I'll take the credit for putting that team together, but they share a ton of the credit for the job that we get done. obviously I couldn't service 85 unions by myself. So
yeah, all those guys are doing a great job. We have, like Tanner mentioned earlier, we have very good relationships with all three of them. Each serves different roles in different capacities. Like, we have Alex at IA every week. Chris is sitting in on a lot of the disciplinary hearings and arbitrations. And Brian Mitchell has, take the ball and ran with it too. He's been showing up at IA as a backup to Alex when he needs to, backup to Chris when he needs to. He's kind of been a, jack of all trades.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a progression. And, I started out myself doing internal affairs. That's where I kind of made my name for myself with former, he was 3rd Precinct trustee, and I think PBA treasurer Billy Mock.
You got a couple good stories.
I have lots of fun.
Yeah, why don't you share a good story with us, Dave? Come on.
All right, here's one of my favorites. So unfortunately, we lost Billy to cancer, I think, a year or two ago. But Billy was old school and great guy, big guy. And I was a brand new attorney, just been admitted, couple of months out of law school, and I maybe for a couple of months I'd been doing some internal affairs interview, and I remember out in police headquarters, they used to have a big cafeteria with a woman there with tables set up selling all kinds of coffee and Danish and stuff like that. And I don't think that exists anymore. But so we would meet in the cafeteria and sit at a table in the back corner to prep before we went up to internal affairs isn't even in headquarters anymore. So, but back in the day. So I go out there, Billy's there with 2 3rd Precinct cops, and we'll sit down, go over the story. They tell me what happens. And I say, oh, okay. I question them a little bit, and they're sticking to their story. And their story was just, it wasn't going to fly. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to get a cup of coffee. Hey, Billy, can I talk to you for a second? Because I don't want to say anything in front of them, right? So I walk up to get my coffee. Billy comes up with me. He's like, and Billy was a great guy. Again, became very close with him, but he was a little gruff at times. He was like, what? And I said, Billy, that story is not going to fly upstairs. It's just not. You want to talk to those guys? I'll go to the bathroom. Why don't you just talk to those guys and, see if they want to refine their story a little bit. And right there in the cafeteria with, the cops sitting across the room and a couple of other people sitting on a table, having something to eat. Who the fuck do you think you are? Those are my guys. If that's what they said happened, then that's what fucking happened. And I don't need any shit from you. And I shrank. I was quite intimidated and may have needed the bathroom at that point if I didn't need it before. And I was like, all right, well, okay. I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm in the bathroom and I'm taking a leak and the door gets kicked open. The door to the communal, multi-serve bathroom in headquarters. I'm like, this guy gonna fucking kill me? What the hell is going on here? And I'm new to representing police. I'm new to representing anybody. And the door, he stands in the doorway. I sense his presence behind me as I'm taking a leak. And he's like, I'm sorry, you're right. Those guys are fucking assholes. I was like, oh, okay, I'll be right back out. All right, do my business. I go back out. The cops apologize. Whatever, we go up to internal affairs, interview, they tell their story, it's fine, nothing happened that I recall, it's all good. So the reason that story stands out, not only because it scared the shit out of me, but the following Friday was, twice a month at Suffolk County PBA. So board meetings, as you two gentlemen obviously know, and at the next board meeting, Billy, who I think was, as I said, 3rd Precinct trustee at the time, but a more senior trustee and a respected guy on the job and trustee and a tough dude. Billy, before the meeting starts, Billy says, I don't know if all of you thought this kid was a piece of shit who just got a job from his father. He goes, but this kid is aces. He's good by me and he should be good by you too.
That's great.
And I was like, oh, thank God. That could have gone the other way. It would have been really bad for my career. So from that point forward, I took off. And then a few months later, Well, we'll get into the Thursday internal affairs stuff.
So one of the things I love about that story, and I've heard it a couple times, Billy Mork's like a legendary figure within the PBA. Everybody knew who he was. Like you said, he's a big, tough guy. And I love that he went right to bat for his guys when you questioned them. But he had the integrity and the smart sense to make sure the right story got out there to you as their representative in internal affairs. And he made sure that those guys weren't put into a worse position by maybe, I don't know the details of it, but maybe withholding something or trying to say something that wasn't as truthful as just coming clean and making sure everything worked out the right way.
Absolutely. He was all of those things. And another word or adjective that I would add to Billy is loyal.
Yeah.
He was a very loyal guy. He was loyal to his third precinct members when he was trustee. He was loyal to obviously all PBA members when he moved up to treasurer position. But he was just loyal to people in general. And I think once you proved yourself to him that you were worthy of his respect, then you had his respect and he'd go to bat for you. And obviously that was my aha moment with Billy. But I think he had that with a lot of people. He was a fighter. Physically and mentally, he was very strong. He was a bright guy also.
That vote of confidence probably meant a lot to you. It probably meant a lot to the rest of the board because they probably trusted him as well.
It might have meant more to my father than everyone else. But,
well, that's a good point. That's like a proud dad moment too, because he's brought you into this profession and he tapped you on the shoulder and put his trust in you. And these guys bought into you pretty quick.
Yeah. So that definitely gave me a huge leg up in my career. I mean, I've been through a lot of presidents. Tommy Tohill was president then. I don't know if you guys were born yet, but but Tommy also came out of the third precinct, and he was a salt of the earth kind of guy as well, much like Billy. And that's who I started under. And
how do you think it's progressed since then? Like you've been here for so many years, and
it's changed a lot. The job has changed a lot.
The nature of policing has changed.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna come back to that if I can, because this is the same point in time where another anecdote that I want to share, because most people wouldn't know it, of we are the only police department in the world that has internal affairs interviews on Thursdays by appointment only.
Right.
And that doesn't exist in every contract since. The county has tried to get that back in negotiations, and obviously we cling to it. So it's a fun story. Actually, it involves Amy Fisher and Joey Buttafuoco. I think Amy Fisher's attorney was a guy named Eric.
Long Island Lolita. Right? Lolita.
Yeah, correct. So it doesn't involve them, but their attorney, Eric Nyberg, was representing a female PPO in the Fifth who was dating another. He wasn't a PPO, just a cop in a Fifth, and they were investigating her. Internal Affairs and the DA's office were investigating her for insurance fraud about a car accident that happened after a bunch of cops were out at a bar and a car got hit. Did somebody ram her, or did she drive off the road, or whatever? It doesn't matter. So the DA's office, Internal Affairs calls the male PO up, and he basically gives them nothing. And then he gets called to the DA's office, which is highly unusual, as you guys know. He just get called to the DA's office it wasn't even a prep. He wasn't being subpoenaed. It was just, we want to speak to you. All right. So the PBA, calls the firm and asks for someone to go. My father asked me to go over, so I go over with him. And again, this is within maybe weeks or months of the Billy Mork incident, but after it. So we go, and it's a brand new young ADA, just as young as me, just out of law school. And she's probing, asking my questions. And at some point she gets frustrated and kind of slams down her pad and says, listen, I listened to your internal affairs interview, and I know you're lying, and you better either come clean, or I'm going to use all the power of this DA's office to make sure that you get indicted and you go to jail, or words to that effect. Can't quote it 30 years later, but she definitely threatened him. And I said, we'd like to take a break. So
good time for a break.
Yeah. I step outside and I say, I'm not sure if you're aware, but you just committed a felony. You just threatened to use the power of the DA's office to coerce a witness to say something that you want. And the person you threatened was a police officer. So we're going to be leaving now. And she went white. She's like, please don't leave. I'm going to get my bureau chief. I'll be right back. So she comes in with the bureau chief and her walk in with a blank pad and said, write the immunity that you want. Whatever you want, you got it. All right. So I don't call the office. What do I write in this? Get somebody in the library to find me some stuff. I write it down and they do it. They type it up and they sign it. Now the male police officer has complete immunity. He goes back, talks to his girlfriend. Girlfriend talks to Eric Nyberg. Eric Nyberg goes to court to get the case thrown out because the police department and the DA's office are conspiring to get him to roll on her. And he's asking for the case to just be dismissed and names me as being part of it. The then deputy commissioner, Bob Kieran, who I used to negotiate all the disciplinary settlements for the PBA. And I think that's done in-house mostly now, but I certainly helped still. But I knew Bob very well. In the few months I was there, maybe a year that I was there at that point, we negotiated all the disciplinary settlements. So Bob called up former Suffolk County PBA second vice president, Tom Muratori, who subsequently became a county legislator, and said, your attorneys are collaborating with Eric Nyberg to screw this case up, and we're never settling another disciplinary case or any case with the PBA as long as you employ that law firm. Holy shit, that's kind of a big deal.
That's another problem.
That's another problem. Time to walk down the hall and go talk to dad. Like, that's not a fun conversation to have with dad in your first year of employment. So we get on the phone with Muratori and ultimately Tohill, and I tell them the story. I'm like, collaborating with him. I didn't talk to the guy. Like, guy's an asshole, but whatever. So we wind up winning that issue. Nyberg recants his comments to the court, withdraws the application, and that part of it goes away. But now Kieran's pissed off, the deputy commissioner. And the way Kieran was going to pay me back was by scheduling internal affairs interviews on Monday at 9, on Monday at 12, and Monday at 4, on Tuesday at 9, on Tuesday at 12, on Tuesday at 4, on Wednesday at 9. I couldn't have a legal career. I couldn't do anything else. And that's why he was doing it, was to screw with me. So we filed a grievance. And guy I mentioned before, Dave Green, was director of labor relations, and he settled the grievance. And the grievance settlement was Thursdays between 9 and 5, all internal affairs. Interviews will be conducted on Thursdays between 9 and 5, unless there's an agreement or quote unquote exigent circumstances, which means an emergency for those who don't know that vocab word. And that's still the rule today. When we signed that agreement, the county refused to follow it. Internal affairs refused to follow it. So I filed a lawsuit to confirm the grievance, which was, well, Pat Lease was the judge. They took over a year before they would sign. The courts didn't want any part of this, but ultimately they confirmed the arbitration.
This is a very unique situation.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
So I finally, after a year, having a call and threatened to, take it to the, head judge, they finally issued the decision confirming the arbitration award. And then I immediately moved to have it converted to a court-ordered judgment.
Wow.
I get the judgment pretty quickly, and I have to now serve it on the day that new police commissioner was being sworn in.
Here, by the way.
I'm blanking on his last name, but John Gallagher. The day John Gallagher gets sworn in as new police commissioner, I served him with papers about the internal affairs being on Thursday. So that didn't go over too well for starting a new relationship. But that's it. That's I mean, nobody would know, but that's the reason we have internal affairs to this day on Thursdays only. And, I represent a lot of agencies, as we said. Trust me, nobody else has that arrangement.
Yeah.
Most of them have 2 hours notice.
Yeah, I remember as a New York City cop, I was a delegate there for a while. And I used to have to go in on GO 15s at 3 o'clock in the morning because there was an incident at 1:15 in the morning. And, internal affairs want to investigate it right away.
Yeah. No, a lot of the benefits Suffolk County PBA has, obviously it's because of great counsel and great leadership, but a lot of it is also because of abuses by the department.
Right.
Personal days on demand.
Right. And
that's how we got personal days also. I don't know if you guys know that history. The personal days on demand, again, there's a few other agencies who have gotten it since, but we were the leader on that. We were the first. We did an arbitration where we put in evidence thousands of requests for personal days off that were denied. And the arbitrator thought it was an outrage and decided, okay, well, now you can't deny it. The county took that decision to court to have it vacated. And we settled it, the court proceeding. And their argument in the court proceeding was, what if the whole precinct calls in on for a personal day? We could have a job action. So we said, okay, we'll make a concession. You can deny a personal day, but only if you can't get anybody countywide to backfill.
Right.
And that's why that's still the rule today for
That's the
personal
Nixels,
days.
right?
That's where the Nixel came in, which just to make sure they can backfill it, because that is still their obligation. That case is it's before me. It's like 88, I think.
Oh, wow.
So,
So I find it interesting, too, how you said, you had mentioned that you used to negotiate the disciplines and things have changed over time. Now Miguel does the negotiating for the discipline. And when you were negotiating discipline, that was under Tohill, I guess, right? And then things have changed since then. So, what other big changes have you seen from president to president or from board to board?
Tohill, I like Tommy a lot. He was the president when I started. He was more of a salt of the earth guy who I think he was a little bit overwhelmed by all that being a Suffolk County PBA president is. And I don't say that condescending at all. There's a lot involved in filling that seat. But he wasn't a politician. He wasn't a quasi-lawyer, which I think you need to be now, certainly. But that was not his personality type. And I kind of alluded to my father earlier. And when he was at the end of his career, he was in the Navy. He was a city cop. He was more the guy to go into negotiations and pound the table and berate somebody and yell at him until he got what he wanted. And that was very common negotiation style, if you will, in the 70s, 80s. And even he, I think, knew that was phasing out and was becoming more legalistic, as I referenced earlier.
Legalistic, diplomatic.
Correct. So in Tohill, I think was more akin to my father. When Jeff Frailer took over as president after Tohill, Frailer was the tough ES cop who was certainly up for the fight, but he was very intellectual. He was very smart, and he was very into the Oxford commas and things like that, and understood those issues. And I guess there's a lot of people who take credit for it, but it really. The biggest change, to answer your question, is politics. Far and away, that is the biggest thing that has changed in my time in the PBA and our relationship with the county and the PD and our success is politics. And what I mean by that is the United States Supreme Court case, Citizens United, I believe came out while Frailer was president, which allowed unlimited, quote unquote, soft money that you can't contribute to a campaign or coordinate with a campaign, but you can spend unlimited amounts of money supporting people, public ed.
People, issues.
Issues, correct. Yeah. Thank you. So Jeff was the first one that really got that rolling, set up the super PAC that the PBA LILIF, and at the same time, so was working that side, but was also starting to work the political side of the boots on the ground campaign. Okay. And Jeff was president, I think, for about 12 years. But that kind of began to evolve there. When Noel became president, that went through the roof. I mean, he just blew it out. And to what it is today, which obviously Tanner is very involved in a lot of stuff and doing a fantastic job on the heels of Bobby Capadona. In my opinion, that is the reason for the Suffolk County PBA's continued success, to the point that when I go to address each academy class right before they graduate, which we did a couple of weeks ago, I tell every academy class, that's your future. Like, I'd like to think I'm a decent lawyer, maybe hopefully a little bit better than that, but the legal arguments will only take you so far. I tell people in negotiations that if you have an adversarial relationship, all right, police have a right to go to arbitration for their contract, and you'll get a decent contract, or you're never going to agree to a less than decent contract. If you have no relationship or a neutral relationship, whether you negotiate it or you arbitrate it, you'll get a decent contract. The only way to get a superior contract is through relationships. Now, they can do it because they love you, or the relationship could be that they fear you. But either way, they're willing to give you what you need, and for your members, for the contract settlement, and for many other things. That's been the evolution of the Suffolk County PBA by far, in my opinion, more than anything else, is the embracing of both the Citizens United decision and the Boots on the Ground campaign to support the candidates.
So that's one of the things I'm most proud of with this union too. The way, like you put it, put the boots on the ground and get our membership engaged with issues of the times as well. So like, we'll be out there, like you said, a lot of this stuff is issue based. So we'll educate the public on the issues behind bail reform and how it handcuffs police officers from doing our jobs effectively. Raise the age, and how we need punishments that fit the crimes. A 17-year-old knows he shouldn't be out there committing armed robberies. We shouldn't be treating a 17-year-old the same way you would treat an 8-year-old that doesn't know any better when they, do something wrong. People that should know better need to be held accountable for their actions. And I take a lot of pride in our members going out there and pushing these public safety issues.
Absolutely. They're important. And so our current president, Lou Savello, obviously continuing to take the ball that was handed to him by President DiGirolamo and continue to run it forward, not only on the political side, trying to expand our scope into, a larger geographical area, whether it be the East End, whether it be into the villages that are within the police district, to the extent more collaboration with Nassau County. I'd like to think I helped with that a little bit. Since a couple of years ago, I got hired by the Nassau County PBA as well. So I'm trying to foster that relationship. They're different jobs. They're different PBAs. They have different priorities and agendas, but you're all supporting police.
Right.
And to the extent there is a lot of overlap, even though there are some differences. And I think Tommy Shevlin and certainly Lou Savello agree that wherever there's overlap, they want to work together. And they've reached out to New York City and beyond, and PCNY, the Police Conference in New York, up in Albany, and legislation in Albany. So I think what Lou is doing in the next generation is trying to take that and expand the scope of it, not the depth of it.
Right.
And I think that's important, because we can kill it here in Suffolk County on political elections, but it's still a blue state. And you need to be able to have greater influence in other jurisdictions and around the state in order to affect state laws.
Yeah, the collaboration on a state level and even like a national level, like after the George Floyd situation. Imagine if all of the police unions throughout the country they participated as much as we did, and as Nassau did, how much we could grow and fight back against some of the bad legislations that a lot of the politicians nationally and statewide do. A lot of times we don't have a voice up there because we're not working together to get that done. And I think Lou's done a tremendous job. He's a big believer in what we do politically with the boots on the ground. He comes out and does it himself. So I think that's huge. And those collaborations are big. And hopefully we continue to collaborate with more and more departments, PBAs, unions countrywide.
Yeah. And what's great about that too is, we started this, like you said, years ago, but our members haven't lost out on their buy-in of the process either. We've crushed the numbers the last couple of cycles. We did a record-breaking year last year.
We've gotten about 1,500 to 1,600 of our guys out the last couple of years. And I think that's huge. It's so important for the members to be involved. They feel invested in what we're doing. It's important for the future of what what this job is going to turn into, the contracts that we've been able to get done because of what we do with the boots on the ground is
and
just
not just our
tremendous.
job, but policing in New York and throughout the country. If we could expand this to other jobs,
Exactly. And when one ship rises, hopefully all the ships rise with us. So that's what we're hoping for. And with the collaborations, get other unions on board. And we've worked with other smaller unions in getting them to do the same thing that we're doing. So continuing that to move it upstate and move it out of state, hopefully, is maybe a next step that we take going forward.
Yeah, I think it's so important on so many levels for legislation, for support from legislators, but it also affects all the other smaller stuff. When you get a county executive elected who is pro-police, not that he's in your pocket, but just who's pro-police, then you're probably going to get a police commissioner who is not there to torture you and break your balls, and a director of labor relations and HR and everything else who you can talk to, who you can work with, who don't have an anti-police agenda.
Right. Create a team that wants to work together.
So correct. So how does that manifest itself? Because now when you have a member who's getting disciplined, who messed up, made a mistake, it happens. I have somebody who's not looking to chop their head off, but somebody who's reasonable, who you can work with to get things done. When you have to negotiate a contract, you have grievances, perb issues. So it certainly makes my job easier, but it makes your job easier. It makes your members better off all the way down the line. So it impacts so many things. And the fact that your members understand that, and I know you speak to them starting in the academy, and I certainly make a point every academy class to mention it with what I do, because I can be the best negotiator in the world, but if the other side is like, no, I'm firing him, he's a probationary police officer and he doesn't have a right to go to a hearing, he's fired. Like, okay, I can't negotiate out of that. But if I have somebody who I have a relationship with to say, well, can we work something out? Give him a second chance, give him a last and final warning, put him on probation.
Was this a mistake of the heart or a mistake of the head?
Yeah. Right. But somebody who's willing to listen.
Right.
And sometimes, listen, my own theory on probationary police officers is like, sometimes we're on our own worst enemy fighting for some of these individuals, because once they get off probation, now we're stuck representing them for the next 20 years. Some people weren't cut out to be police officers, but for the ones that were, at least you have an opportunity to make ground with them.
Right. And I think it's a great point, too, that the administration can build this team that's supportive. Under County Executive Romaine and Police Commissioner Catalina and the current legislature, they've been hiring cops. We got more cops out there on the road, keeping each other safe. Commissioner Catalina just transferred 9 cops to the Highway Patrol. We're going to make that more robust. And this is part of backing us up with our officer safety issues, too, after what just happened to Brendan Gallagher.
Right.
They're increasing the penalties for these street racing cars. Now they can impound the cars and
crush them.
Right, yeah. Exactly. You got to make the penalties fit the crimes. And they're doing that to help us be more effective in doing our job and to keep us safer.
You have to give Ed Romano kudos for doing all that, because a lot of those things are things that he promised during his campaign, and he's really following through with his issues towards public safety.
Yeah, so he's walking
the talk. His job. Yeah.
So to go back to your original question of what have I seen change? That's the biggest change. The other, there's a lot of changes, I guess, but the other changes, I think, for you gentlemen. And lady, we have obviously a female trustee now as well. The time and effort commitment, it just continues to go up on your parts each and every year. The commitment is enormous. The amount of knowledge you need to acquire in order to effectively do your job, and working in the office, answering questions, dealing with issues all day long, and then going to fundraisers and events and other union events and whatever all night. It's tough, and I don't think your average member has any idea what you guys do for them.
That's where the relationship starts too, like supporting those candidates before they're even in office, and it's a lot of late nights and going to their events, and
it's not just a 9 to 5 here. It's we got to build these relationships all the time.
Absolutely, but another event that's terribly important that you guys do a great job of are the membership engagement events, because dealing with other clients over the years, not so much here. What you guys do correctly that not every union does is when it's election time every 4 years for you guys aren't saying, oh, you're going to come around 2 weeks before the ballots go out. I haven't seen you in 3 3/4 years. Like, you guys are out there. Mm-hmm. So you're not only going to events for the politicians, you're not only going to events to support your brothers and sisters in the labor movement, but you're out there for your members as well, not just going to your union meeting. And if the member doesn't come to the union meeting, you don't see them. You're going to them. You have the truck, you have the events. And so what you guys do, you really do cover all the bases. And listen, it wasn't like that when I started.
Right. Yeah. We try to keep that open line of communication with our members, because ultimately that's why we're here and that's why we're doing the work. You mentioned we take the food truck out to the precincts, do barbecues. We do the annual cornhole tournament. We try to host, even our open meetings every month. We try to host them at nice places that are going to entice the membership to come and be engaged, so we could hear what the issues are in the precincts. We could hear what the issues are out on the street, or what they're dealing with, say, an ADA who gave them a hard time on a case after they made an arrest over a certain, event out on the road. So it's good to keep that communication with our members. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing it.
Absolutely.
I think our delegate body does a tremendous job too, and we couldn't be as successful without their support and all that they do.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to put that out there as well.
Yeah, for sure. It takes a village, right? And in this case, the village is, the members, the delegates, and the board, and everyone. You have to have buy-in from everyone. I see, unfortunately, a lot of unions have all those positions and may be filling them, but not doing the job of the position. Right. So it takes a lot. It's a big operation. It's a big business, the PBA, and it's a complicated business because you touch on so many areas. So. No, I think you guys are doing a great job. I think you're on the right track. I think the other thing that I'll say that Suffolk County PBA has done very well, that again, not all other unions have, or sometimes they try, but it's not successful. Where it's been successful here is a smooth transition of leadership. Mm-hmm. Tohill turned the reins over to Frailer, who turned the reins over to Noel, who turned the reins over to Lou, and I'm sure Lou has a succession plan that he's working on as well, that hopefully involves you gentlemen. But I think that's important to have that continuity. Listen, sometimes Nassau County PBA had a shakeup. Worked out well for me also, because that's how I got hired. But I got hired, by Pete Patterson when he was interim president after McDermott left, and then briefly had Spadaccini until they had their elections. And then obviously Tommy Shefflin took over. So there was not a smooth, but they're still suffering the consequences. I think Tommy and his board are doing a fantastic job. Mm-hmm. They were dealt a very tough hand, having had a contract pattern set by the detectives for the first time in in the history of their pattern bargaining, and then the SOA going and them going third. And then negotiating a contract, the prior administration of the PBA negotiated with the county a contract that membership voted down.
Right.
And then you come in as new president and go, okay, got a new team. So listen, maybe sometimes you do need to clean house. And Tommy was dealt a very difficult hand and has done a fantastic job, in my opinion, of playing that hand and continuing to play that hand. But it's tough, So maybe they did need to clean house. So I think the combination of us in Suffolk, doing the job right and having our affairs in order, and then having the succession plan is the smoothest. And I'm sure all of my clients, that's what they want, to be able to deliver for their members and then be able to put people in place to follow them to continue to deliver for their members. So in that regard, I think you guys are the model, and hopefully it persists for many, many years.
Yeah, and hopefully it expands to other unions as well. Like you said, once in a while a union might need a shakeup, and I think Tommy's been doing a great job. We've been very close in communications with Tommy and his team. I was just texting with Ed Eilenberger earlier today, their treasurer. Mm-hmm. We sometimes we bounce things off of each other, and I think it should be noted that the work that Tommy's been putting in for the peer-to-peer help and the mental health with policing, we've been right there with him, but Tommy's been kind of leading the charge on that up in Albany. And we were at an event just a couple nights ago, and we have to stay issue-based. We don't always we're not always at war with everybody over every little thing, but, Tish James was one of the keynote speakers, and she knew her audience, and she spoke about Tommy's mental health bill and how everybody should be supportive of the mental health bill. And she got a room full of Democrats, giving applause to cops that are out there dealing with these issues and wants the support for this mental health bill. So I get
and the other way too, cops supporting her in her support of the mental health bill.
Right.
So you never hear that.
Right. And so I give Tish James a lot of credit of, at least with, this issue, coming out and being supportive of the things we need. And a lot of that has to do with the work that Tommy's done. And Lou's been up there. I know Lou's met with Tish a number of times. He's met with Governor Hochul a number of times. But, it's great to have that partnership with the other police unions around us.
You don't have the luxury when you're a union of this size and magnitude of being one party. Especially
you can't. It's impossible. You cannot operate that way.
You can't. So you have to go issue by issue with each candidate. And maybe there's some people. I can think of one county legislator in particular that even if he votes for the contract finally for the first time in his career, he's still a bad guy, and I still don't anticipate him ever getting support from the Suffolk County PBA. But not every legislator that you disagree with on an issue or even several issues is your enemy.
Correct.
So don't make them your enemy. Find common ground when you can and respectfully disagree the rest of the time, and leave the opportunity open to do business with them in the future. As a union, as a lobbyist, and, union has, Chris Wolf goes to Albany, does a great job of doing lobbying along with PCNY. That's how you have to be, because if you shut them out, they shut you out, and then all the anti-police legislation comes through, and there's nothing you can do about it. You don't even have a dialogue.
Right.
And that dialogue's key.
Yeah. And I think it's important. Tanner's done a great job of maintaining good relationships with, the party chairs and other, every level of representation. Rich Schaefer's a very down-to-earth guy. We have an open line of communication with him. We recently recorded an episode of On Patrol with Anthony Portisi. He's the town of Brookhaven Democratic chair. So even though right now the vast majority of our support comes from the Republican side, there are Democrats that still are those working class Democrats that support law and order, that want their families to grow up in a safe environment. And I think it's important to make sure that those Democrats remain in positions of influence within that party, so that party comes back to the working class Americans.
Well, Steve Ballone for 12 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve was great for the cops in the PBA.
Just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So, we supported him in his original election against Steve Levy, and all of his subsequent campaigns, because he did the right thing by the police.
Right. It's important for our membership to remember that we stay issue-based, and we're not just blindly with one party or another.
Absolutely.
It's important to have a seat at those tables. And to be able to have influence and talk to people and tell them what's going on in law enforcement, because most of these people, they've never had a career in law enforcement, so they don't know what it's like. So something like the mental health bill that Tommy's been pushing for, I really don't know how certain legislators can't get behind that bill. I think it's really a no-brainer. It doesn't matter what party you're from. But yeah, I think just having a seat at the table and being able to talk back and forth gives us a lot.
Yeah, open lines of communication are key. And, we're hopeful to maintain that with a lot of the people that are in office right now.
Absolutely. I think it's important to avoid. I have a couple of other anecdotes and kind of historical stuff from PBA perspective that, listen, Suffolk PBA has been a trendsetter for decades. And there are a bunch of items in your contract that some of which have gone viral in other union contracts, but they started here. One benefit we have that a lot of unions do have is arbitration for discipline. But I don't think the average Suffolk County PBA member understands that that's the minority of jobs in New York State because of state law. Nassau County doesn't and can't negotiate arbitration for disciplinary cases. New York City doesn't have and cannot negotiate. Same for every single village in the state of New York, every single town in the state of New York. So most cops don't have that. They get a kangaroo court in front of a hearing officer appointed by the police commissioner. So you're guilty until you're found guilty. So that's a big benefit that, on top of internal affairs by appointment, and then you have that. Our disciplinary protocols are are about as good as you could possibly have in a PBA. Having a second chance if you're found to have drugs or steroids, and I don't know, multiple chances depending on the level of alcohol, which goes to the mental health and goes to a lot of the other stuff that you guys were just mentioning. And I agree. And I don't know of another police agency that has that. Like that, we're a first. We're the trendsetter on that, and that's important.
Like you said, that definitely goes towards the mental health of our members because we see so many traumatic incidents throughout our career, a lot more than the normal person would in their line of work. And unfortunately, a lot of guys have trouble dealing with it from time to time, and they might start self-medicating with alcohol, and it might get a little out of hand from time to time.
You can't appreciate how frustrating it is when you're in the room before we had these agreements on drugs and alcohol, and you're defending a police officer for alcohol abuse against a police commissioner who's a known alcoholic, who's a blackout drunk, who's trying to fire your member for alcohol abuse. The hypocrisy of it is
a bit of a double standard.
So that's why having arbitration, having a drug, alcohol, and steroid policy that makes sense, all of these things merge together. And it's important. But a couple other highlights, body cameras. I know we had $3,000 for body cameras added to the base. We're the first. We're the first one. I think it was officially for police reform.
I think technically it's not for the body cameras.
Not for the body cameras. It was body cameras and other items. Got it. But we were the first, and then around the state, around the country, people are following suit with what Suffolk County PBA was the first to do. By the way, the drug and alcohol policy, drug testing. We were one of the first police groups in the state to do drug testing. Why? Foresight.
Right.
We looked ahead and said, this is coming, is one. Two, we don't want to work alongside other police officers who are drunk or high.
Right.
So, and then three, if we wait, we're just going to wind up having this rammed down our throat, either in negotiations by an arbitrator
it's coming
or by
anyway.
law. So we were the first ones to negotiate random reasonable cause testing. Why? Because we got to write on a clean slate. We got to put in all of the protections. We got to put in all the right for the random sampling and the right for the PBA to observe the random sampling so they weren't scoring around, to use the federal guidelines for DOT testing, to do the testing at an approved lab and what they can test for. Other agencies didn't get that benefit. They just got it rammed down their throat. So again, by being innovative, this is now a bad word, by being progressive, but I don't mean it in the liberal agenda sense, but being progressive and looking ahead down the road at what's coming, preparing for it, being out in front of it, and then agreeing to contract provisions that make sense for the county, make sense for the public, but also make sense for us and protect us, is how we've done so very well in so many areas. Another one along the same lines, med school. I have police departments, I get hired. City of Poughkeepsie PBA, client of ours for, I don't know, probably 10 years now. So I said, well, if you get hurt on the job and there's a dispute of whether or not, you can work or can return to work, how do you guys deal with that? This is at the job interview. And they go, oh, the job sends our guy down to a place called Medscope down on Long Island.
Oh, get out of here.
I swear to God.
I never knew that.
I have a whole bunch of groups.
Sends their guys down here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the doctor who ran Medscope for many, many years, since its inception, is retiring or has just retired. But 10 years ago, anyway, they were sending people from City of Poughkeepsie down to Dr. Craig Rosenberg on Long Island to do their...
Oh, so that's the first time ever hearing of that?
Yeah. But,
that's interesting.
But there's agencies all over the state that, if they didn't send it to him, but adopted our protocol to say the PBA in the village or the town or the county or wherever it is will agree on a third neutral doctor. And how that came about was common sense again. But again, you have to have a partner in the dialogue, and you need politics to get a good partner, but you have to have a partner in the dialogue. So our dialogue was, listen, we know that sometimes somebody who claims an orthopedic injury, a back injury, is legit. We'll acknowledge some of them may be full of shit. Mm-hmm. But you don't know. Your internal affairs sure as hell doesn't know. Your police surgeon probably knows less than your internal affairs knows. And we don't know. Mm-hmm. So who has the best opportunity to figure it out? Sending him to a hearing officer appointed by the police commissioner? Sending him to an arbitrator who's an attorney? How the hell are they going to know? I don't know if anybody could figure it out, we said. But the one who's most likely to be able to, if anyone can figure it out, would be a doctor.
Right.
So why don't you send all your medical records? We'll send all our medical records. That neutral doctor can examine the subject, the police officer, order whatever tests he or she deems necessary, and then they'll make a decision based upon medical evidence and decide return to duty, don't return to duty, limited duty, what the restrictions are. And we had a partner at the time on the other side, and this is in the 90s, and they said, yeah, that makes sense. We'll do that.
Yeah, and honestly, it does. It's a common sense approach to a common problem.
But I can't tell you how many clients I've negotiated contracts for where I've proposed exactly that, and they go, no. Well, why not? Because we're going to have our commissioner appoint a hearing officer who's going to do it.
Now, is that something you could go down the path of not negotiating in good faith, like just a blind no, or are there things you can just give a hard no on?
You can give a hard no. PERB law and negotiations is I don't know if maybe I'd say it's not what most people think it is. So the duty to negotiate is essentially, in my words, I'm not quoting cases here, but is the obligation to meet and discuss.
Okay. No
obligation to agree. So you have a right to say no. You have a right to refuse. You just can't refuse to talk about it, but you don't have to agree. Mm-hmm. So having a partner with the county, with the department, with your employer, it is important because you don't want to have to go to interest arbitration every time. And if you don't have a partner, the law says those interest arbitrations are only for 2 years unless both sides agree to longer. So I've had clients, one village in Nassau County comes to mind, who did a 2-year interest arbitration, followed by a 2-year interest arbitration, followed by a 2-year interest arbitration, followed by a 2-year interest arbitration. Mm-hmm. And usually you're not addressing as many issues. The arbitrator, I should say, you might have 20 proposals in a village, might have 20 proposals, but the arbitrator is not dealing with 40 items. The arbitrator is going to deal with 4 items.
Right.
So neither the employer or the union get to address a lot of their issues. So both sides in that regard lose. And it's also the time and expense. It's a lot of work and it takes a long time. So by the time you go through those series of interest arbitrations, your last 2-year arbitration might be for 2024 and 2025, but that arbitration may not happen until 2028. Mm-hmm. And then it's all retro. And then you're still 2 years, 3 years expired.
You're falling behind at that
it's
point.
It's a mess. Yeah. It's a mess. So, and that's why you asked me the big exchange, and I keep going back to that question because it's so important. The politics are, in my opinion, what really drives everything. The politics and those efforts give you relationships. The relationships give you partners on the other side who are reasonable. I'm not saying giving the store away, but listen, with the contract we just did.
Yeah.
Right? BRO said it's a reasonable contract. It's at or below the rate of inflation. It's affordable for the county and recruitment and retention issues. We backed Romaine and a lot of the legislators. Even legislators we didn't back voted for it because it made sense.
It made sense. It addressed issues on both sides.
And that's really, we're not, as Newsday likes to call us, the union bosses looking to, scam the county and rip off everybody and the taxpayer. Listen, I have private sector employees who don't have police powers, don't have guns and tasers, and don't have powers of arrest and do more menial labor, who are making salaries close to what you're making.
Right.
So the fact of you have to look at the job market.
Correct.
And there's a huge hiring problem for police, and it really hasn't hit Long Island yet. But because your pay and benefits are what they are, I represent. I'm not gonna name the
Well, even if
municipalities.
it did hit Long Island and say we're filling the seats, you do see the recruitment way down. Our last test, the amount of people that are signing up for the test now has dropped by 2/3 since the late 90s.
Correct. It used to be around 40,000. I think we had 9,000 applicants on the last test, right? So, but even not that far away, a 2-hour drive away in New York, up in the Hudson Valley, I negotiated a contract on the east side of the river with one municipality, and then one on the west side, which had higher starting pay. Then the one on the east side of the river came back to the PBA maybe a year later and said, can we reopen the contract? We want to raise starting pay. Sure, because they couldn't hire.
Mm-hmm.
Then the municipality on the other side of the river said, can we want to raise it? That PBA said, sure. Then the one on the east side of the river came back again and said, we want to reopen again and raise starting pay again. So they're leapfrogging each other, which is great for a union, I guess, and great for the municipality. They were the ones asking for it. And we said no. And they said, excuse me? What do you mean? What do you mean no? And we said, if you raise starting pay anymore, it's going to be higher than the second step pay.
Oh, wow.
So if you want to raise it again, you got to raise all the steps. And they said, okay. We just negotiated, my partner Chris negotiated last year at the city of Newburgh, a 31% pay increase. That was just year one.
That's incredible.
Wow.
I think he's got an offer on the table somewhere else in the Hudson Valley, 18%
For 1 year.
for the first year.
That's incredible.
Because they can't hire.
Can't hire.
I think in Dutchess County, they had 500 people sign up for the test. 300 people took it. A lot of them didn't pass the psychological or the physical. And the list was exhausted within weeks of coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So you have New York City who's giving a perpetual test. You can walk in any day and go take the test. But my concern to take that the next step, and it is my concern for the PBA and for law enforcement and for municipalities and for the residents, what's going to happen? We used to only take people at the top of the test. Now, we could have an interesting debate whether or not scoring 100 on the test means you're going to be a good cop or not. We can definitely debate that. And I was involved in all the nonsense with the Department of Justice and the scams on the test and TestGate, where Suffolk County tried to fire 55 people for allegedly cheating on the entrance exam. You guys familiar with that?
Yes.
All right, so, okay.
I was a kid when that happened, but I do remember the story. I was
so-
a high school kid when that happened.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I represented the 55.
Mhm.
So ridiculous. But what happens is at least you have a lot of people to choose from. What happens when instead of 9,000 in a few years, we only have 2,000?
Mhm.
An applicant, as a rule of thumb, applicant investigation generally says they get 1 out of 10. What are you going to hire? And you're not only hiring at that point people who got 100, but you're hiring people who got the bare minimum score to pass.
Right.
So the quality of your candidates is going to go down. As the quality of your candidate goes down, the quality, arguably, of your police officer goes down.
Right. You would think that relationship makes sense.
As the quality of your police officer
Yeah.
goes down, and the amount of scrutiny and body cameras and ring doorbells
Mhm.
and everything else and Attorney General's office and Lemio and OSI and
It's not good for the
internal affairs.
municipality to deal with.
It's not good. Well, liability for the municipality.
And the public.
But you're taking, quote unquote, less qualified. Again, I'm not sure exactly how strong a correlation there is to how well you score on the test to how good a cop you are. But there's got to be some correlation. Otherwise, they shouldn't have a test. But as you take the bottom of the barrel from the test and you're making the job requirements more substantial and computers and guns and now tasers and this and then, penal law and you can't touch somebody's chest and compress their diaphragm and you're putting more and more restrictions on them and more surveillance on them. It's inevitable that you're going to have more complaints, more lawsuits, more problems, more criticism of the police departments and the police officers. So it's almost becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. We criticize the police. We have this anti-police campaign. People don't want to go into that profession. And the people who do go into that profession maybe shouldn't be in that profession, which is only going to fuel the fire of criticisms more. So it's a vicious cycle we're in. I'm not sure what the solution is. Obviously, pay and benefits is one, but I don't know if that's enough because if the pay and benefits in the Hudson Valley, as I spoke about before, were to skyrocket and be competitive here, well, that's going to put more pressure on here. If there's only so many people who want to be cops, and that's an issue. Like when you grew up, I've heard you on other podcasts and playing cops and robbers as a kid.
Right.
Cops and robbers as a kid. The cop was a good guy. Now it's the robber who's the good guy.
Right.
It's crazy.
It's bizarre. And that goes back to what we were talking about political influence too, right? If we have politicians that are supportive of the police and give us the tools we need to do the job correctly and effectively, there'll be less of those negative stories out there that get, perpetuated throughout the mainstream media that paint us in a bad light. And I think the political relationships can help turn this tide because we could get the positive stories out there. We can make it enticing to be a cop again. When somebody hears about somebody, making a big arrest or chasing down a bad guy, or even if it's saving an infant's life in CPR, it could be more enticing for people to grow up wanting to do this work. They'll take more pride in it.
And public safety and government go hand in hand. I mean, I think we do a good job on Long Island, especially in Suffolk County, of really bringing those two things together and making sure we have good public safety. That way the citizens and the constituents that are voting for the politicians believe that they live in a safe place. I don't know if you could really say the same thing about the city, where a lot of people come out to Long Island to avoid going to the city, where it becomes a dangerous place where people are getting pushed in front of trains and there's garbage and stuff on the streets in the city. I mean, I think for sure public safety and government go hand in hand.
They do, but putting my trust in the media, who is known to fabricate stories that sell papers and media time, and then make them go national when they're just patently false and fabricated.
Right.
And we know they're willing to do that. So unless they have a change of ideology, I don't see us relying on the mainstream media for that. I think this podcast comes into play. But let me give you an anecdote, true story about relying on government to fix it. When Jeff Fraley was president, and Richard Dormer was then the police commissioner, who we had a very tense relationship with, shall we say. We took a lot of federal COPS grant money. Now, COPS grant money was very specifically designed to supplement, not supplant, your police officers. So if you had 100 police officers and you took COPS money for 10 police officers, you had to go to 110. You couldn't take money for 10, have 100, through attrition go down to 90, and then hire 10 and still be at 100. Mm-hmm. That's supplanting. Well, Suffolk County supplanted 250 police officers. They took money for 250, 300 cops, and their headcount was lower than when they took the first dollar. So we're like, this is ridiculous. They're ripping off the federal government. We wanted them to hire 250 above, obviously. So we put a whole dossier together of all their grant applications, head counts, everything else, and reached out to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. And they said, they blew us off for a long time. And finally it said, okay, we got a meeting. So Jeff and I flew down to Washington. We go to the Department of Justice. We meet with 3 people there, 2 AUSAs and an investigator. And we go through the whole thing with folders with documentation of everything I just described to you. And we finished, and they looked at us, and they said, is that it? And we said, yeah. And they said, did anybody take the money and buy a house with it, or a car, or put a pool in their backyard? Or steal the money and put it in their 401k? We said, not that we know of. And they said, okay, thanks for coming. Because there's so much corruption going on with all these grant monies, even back then in the 90s, that this complete misuse of the money, they said, as long as they're using it for police,
for something,
it's not in the top 100 cases we need to investigate.
Right. And this goes back to the times of the Gilbo investigation too, right? So,
yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
so, and I think that's one of the things that gets overlooked a lot when there's some criticism of how the Suffolk police handled that case. We were down manpower, so we didn't necessarily have the resources to do these grid searches around Gilgo because we still needed cops in the cars responding to 911 calls, ongoing emergencies.
Gone Girls, I think Stu Cameron talks about that a little bit.
Right, exactly. And Stu did a great job of trying to explain like kind of what was going on at that time that kind of prevented us from doing some of the things we maybe would have liked to have done sooner.
Listen, staffing has been an issue here forever. I mean, we've had some changes now, but for the most part, most of Suffolk County's police staffing is still based upon 1960 staffing levels and population
numbers,
businesses, traffic, visitors. It's antiquated. We're making it work, but it should be beefed up based upon population and travel and everything else. But here we are.
And I think the current administration is definitely in tune with that. Like we said earlier, we've been doing a lot of hiring. Yeah, we just added they got to start manning 2 more sectors on the highway.
Right.
So I think the current administration is definitely more in tune with that and the modern day issues and how we have to move forward as a department.
Another modern day issue that I know you touched on a prior podcast was MedCat and MedCast. I don't know of another agency that has that. Fantastic. What a great operation. I hope it grows and it spreads because it's saving, not only Brendan Gallagher's life and not only legislators' life, but countless other residents and visitors to Suffolk County. What a great!
They're out there for us. They're out there for the public. It's one of the real, I think, unknown tools. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I feel like it doesn't get the publicity it deserves, and it's one of the things that.
Why don't we turn Voswinkle to the media and let him go?
So Voswinkle will be on here eventually, and I'm sure he'll be no holds barred. Because I know
great. That guy's awesome.
He's great, and it's really to everybody's benefit that we have Dr. Voswinkle here and this MedCat and MedCast team.
I agree.
We're truly blessed to have him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just the list goes on and on of stuff that Suffolk County PBA either has that nobody else has, or that we have that we were the first to do it, and then lots of people have copied that because it made sense and it works. So, back to myself and the firm and everything, like that's what I pride myself on doing, having that foresight, trying to listen. You have to deal with the here and now and the politics and the budgets and everything else when you're dealing with the county, but it also inject common sense. And then try and be visionary about it. Where's the world going? I mean, the conversation I had with a bunch of PBA board members today was about AI and talking about our kids. What do you tell your kid to study in school today? For what's a good job 10 years from now with AI and robotics and everything else. And I don't know the answers. I wish I did. I'd know where to invest my money. But as a union, I think that's what we have done a very good job of doing. And that's what we need to continue to do, because that is what has separated us from many of our peers, is that ability to anticipate what's going to happen in the future and be ahead of the curve. And that's what I pride myself in doing. So it's the work ethic, it's the attention to detail. Yes, it's all of those things, but you need a bigger picture perspective too. And I think, and you need relationships. I mean, let's face it. At the end of the day, you can be as brilliant as you want to be, but if you don't have a relationship with somebody who's willing to get something done, you're not going to get anything done. Right. So you kind of got to put all of those different things together.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that's actually an excellent point to leave off on as well. I think one of the things I just want to get out there for at least the membership that's watching is, David's firm, not only are they our labor attorneys, but like you mentioned, they do, personal injury. His sister Allison does simple wills for our members. If you're eligible to get one done every other year, so you can update your information with your new children or a new spouse. So I think it's just important for our members to know that you
divorces, divorce mediation, house closing,
right? Your firm does a lot of services that our members can take advantage of.
Absolutely. So one of the other benefits we didn't touch on that relates to that, if I may, and then we can wrap up, is the Suffolk County PBA provides its members with a legal services plan. So a lot of the items that CJ just mentioned, the firm provides. Now, I don't want to give the impression that we just have lawyers who work legal service plan and don't give a hoot 3/4 of our business are people who just come to the firm for the lawyers who work there and the quality of their work product. 1/4 of our clients are there because of unions like the Suffolk County PBA who have a legal service plan. So you're getting a legit lawyer, not some lawyer we keep in a closet until there's union work to do. But we do a tremendous amount of all of that, what I call general practice work, the wills, the divorces, the house closings. As you said, my sister is a partner in the firm in our general practice department. She's also a certified divorce mediator, and I think the legal service plan covers a good chunk of the cost of mediation if you choose that instead of traditional divorce. And then Steve Ferber is the guy in Suffolk County for personal injury, medical malpractice, product liability case. He's probably taken more cases to trial and verdicts than any other lawyer in Suffolk County early in his career for another very large at the time firm in Bayshore, I believe. He was their trial counsel and did hundreds of cases. Like, that's all he did. He just finished one trial and they handed him another case to go on to do the next trial. So probably, I don't know, half of his business comes from other lawyers who have a personal injury case that they think they'll just take it in, don't really know what they're doing, but I'll settle it and I'll make some money, but it's too complex or it's going to trial. And then they send that work to our firm.
They bring in the closer.
Right? So he's the guy who really knows the ins and outs, and he's got a team of 5 attorneys also, and that's all they do is their personal injury med mal stuff. But he is the man. So every lawyer out there wants to take the personal injury case. Frankly, it's the most valuable or lucrative part of the law firm. PBA pays me well, and I'm not complaining, but. We have a case in the office now with a guy who lost both his legs when he got hit by a railroad train. And, that case may get dismissed. But if that case doesn't get dismissed, it may be much more than the Suffolk County PBA pays the firm an annual retainer.
So we're not going to renegotiate your retainer right here.
No? Darn it. All right. Well, all good. But my point is, any lawyer who can get their hands on that case is going to take it because that's going to make their year. But it doesn't mean they know how to do the case, how to litigate the case, how to work up the case, never mind how to do the trial. So he's the best of the best when it comes to that type of stuff. And we have a good firm. I talked about the attorneys in the labor department. We have 15 attorneys, all told. And like I said earlier, for the labor, it's true for the whole firm. We've put together a really good team of people who are good men, women, people, who are very good at their craft, and I'm very proud of all of them. So,
do you want to just let them know where they can find you or reach you?
Sure. So, Davis and Ferber, Ferber is the name of the firm. The website is davisferber.com, and our cell phone. Wow, that was habit. The office number is 631-543-2900. As I said before, we're open for business with anybody who needs legal assistance. But if you are a PBA member, certainly make that known when you call for your appointment or when you come in for your appointment. And there may be substantial discounts or free services that are provided through those legal service plans. But we're happy to help anybody, especially anybody in law enforcement, because that's our meat and potatoes.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate it. A lot of fun, Dave.
Appreciate it.
All right.